back, everybody, to BFO, your new BFF. We have a fantastic show for you. This is Sarah, one of your podcast hosts, and I am, of course, with my other friends.
It's me, John.
Eliza.
Christian, what's more?
And the guest for tonight is Elena. It's me. Hi, everyone.
We are so excited to have you. Thank you for coming.
Our first special guest. We love it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
Elena, we are absolutely thrilled to have you here. Just so our audience has a little bit of background before we get into the good stuff with you. So you became interested in BFO when you were writing your master's thesis on artifacts, and you are now pursuing your PhD from the university at Buffalo, and you wanted to have a bit more practicality for the philosophy masters that you received, and you're really focusing in on waste management. Tell us a little bit about that, Elena.
Yeah, I will start to give a bit of background of my master, because during my master I spent 1 year in Germany studying German idealism. So I was supposed to write a thesis in German idealism, which didn't happen. So I tried to switch a bit the field for my research. And my advisor directed me to read Building Ontologies with the Basic Formal Ontology. So I went through that, and then we kind of decided together to be on a bit of more theoretical side of things, so not get into the weeds of the technicalities of applied ontology, but stay like, oh, what are artifacts? How we can define them? What's it's useful to define artifacts? I decided to put a bit of the work that I did when I was reading Building Ontologies with BFO on these theoretical sides. So what are function, roles, and dispositions in BFO. These were also concepts that I tried to go into the details when I was, trying to examine and study artifacts on a philosophical perspective mostly. The word applied ontology, BFO, was always on the back of my head. I was, let's say, not so ready to pursue a PhD right after grad school. So I went through a couple of others adventures.
That's a lot to unpack for us. So the first thing I want to flag for everybody who's listening, because I know not everybody knows that much about ontologies or basic formal ontology. Elena mentioned the book Building Ontologies with Basic Formal Ontology, and that is by the godfather himself, Barry Smith, the creator of a basic formal ontology. So if you want to know more about BFO, that is absolutely the resource to go for. Now, Elena, you mentioned specifically functions, roles, and dispositions. Can you talk to us a little bit more about those? Because we haven't introduced those concepts to our viewers.
Functions, role, and disposition are something that are useful when we do when we build ontologies with the BFO, because they are very, very important categories that we can use for model different domains. So if we consider BFO, and usually we can find a graph that are the representation of BFO, we can see these terms, role, disposition, and function, under realizable entities. So it's something that can be realized, not necessarily by an entity, so an instance of the word. So in BFO, roles are something that the bearer can have or they cannot, and they depend on the context. So for example, in this very moment, me, Sarah, Eliza, John, Christian, we're playing the role of recording the podcast, being part of the podcast. So as member of a team, we are recording. So this is our role in this moment. But it depends on where we are, what we are doing. It's not something that defines us. It's not something that depends from our physical structure or anything else. So it's context, time, and it's dependent of the setting, the setup. While dispositions are different because it's something that the instance, the material entity, has in its structure. So, for example, one of the one of the examples that we can do, I have the disposition to walk. So my body has inherently the disposition to perform the act of walking. And this depends, of course, by the fact that I have legs. It doesn't mean that I'm doing it for the whole time. So for example, now I'm sitting, I have the disposition to walk, I'm not realizing that disposition. The function, it's more a more normative concept, and this is tricky. So because we can say that, example, the function of the heart is to pump blood and make the blood circulate through the body. So it's something that it's a disposition, but it's a bit, I would say, a bit more specific than a disposition, because it really tells us what a certain instance, a certain part of the body it's, and let's put this with caution, supposed to do.
So to add another example, a hammer has a disposition of banging a nail. That's what its form has been created for. But it also might have a function of smashing a window.
I would say yes, but so I think we need a bit of caution in this example, because if you say that, so if we say that the hammer has the disposition to bang a nail, I think that would be more the realization of an inner disposition, because the hammer has been structured for doing this, but it's more a function because it's what the hammer has been built for. So if we say that the hammer has the disposition of banging a nail in a wall, this might be a misleading, because the hammer has been engineered, thought as having the function, has been built with that particular shape, because that's the function of the hammer. Otherwise, if we can use the hammer for a bunch of other things. So I would say that if we use the hammer to destroy a window, that would be a role of the hammer in that particular context. So for example, I'm locked out, I don't know how to get into my apartment, I don't care about my window, it's more important that I get in because, I don't know, I have something on the stove. So I take the hammer, and as it has this physical shape, and I think, okay, right now the hammer can also help me to enter in my apartment, so I use it.
The hammer has a temporary role as a house key.
Yeah. A very, let's say,
one-time use destructive.
Yeah, destructive mouse. Yeah.
So we just talked about, in your experience, kind of prior to ontology, was in philosophy. We just talked about BFO, how it's a kind of practical applied ontology, right? So when you think about ontology, or when you're doing your work in ontology, do you like thinking about the philosophical side more of ontology, or the practical application side of ontology?
I would say that when I now work on applied ontology project, I like to see their potential of solving problem in the world. So not much about the philosophical side. Otherwise, when I was actually working in logistics, I was thinking a lot about the philosophical side of moving stuff around the world, and how the value changes from here and there. A lot about those things, yeah.
Just got this picture of you, like, at your desk somewhere, just having these deep thoughts about, like, the existential nature of waste or something, while you're still being asked to get things from, like, point A to point B, which is quite a humorous picture inside my head. If you could, because you talked about how you like to kind of have ontologies that solve a problem in the world, if you had like a magic wand that you could just create a perfect ontology for anything in the world to solve a problem, what would that be?
Illegal waste trafficking, discovering where the waste goes when it's off the books for whatever reason they decide to, economical reasons or any other reason. I would really like to have an ontologist that enables me to find what illegal waste is and where it is.
Well, it's a very interesting topic. There are so many documentaries out about that now, about even legal waste, which we think we're recycling, but it ends up washing up on the shores of Africa or delivered there. And And it's a huge problem. So I can only imagine how much more of a problem the illegal waste is.
Can you just provide a little bit of background, like how you got interested in waste management? What was the sort of moment in your life that you were like, oh my God, this is absolutely fascinating?
Thank you. Thank you, Eliza, for this question. When I started working in logistics, I ended up having one of my major clients moving paper waste from the UK to Germany. So for me was already fascinating. I was like, wow, the amount of money that they're paying me for the transport, it's much more than the value of what it's inside the truck. And I was already, what's going on here? And then I found out that in Germany, they have a very good paper recycling facilities. So they have a lot of demand for paper waste. And that's how it worked. So I was like, oh, look, this product doesn't have any value there. It's waste. It's considered waste. But then for another country, another facility is not waste anymore. It's something that they want. They really want. They want it actually very bad. And that was already, for my, let's say, philosophical mind, already fascinating. I was just very fun. And then I had another client, also aluminum scrap. It's even more fascinating because we can melt an aluminum can as many times as we want. We can it can have different shapes as many times as we want. But the key is that we need to recycle it. So that can outside my recycling bin has no value. It's just trash. But if we recycle it, we have an infinite potential of one single artifact. And this was a bit how waste was fascinating for me. Actually, working in waste management was a bit more a circumstance job because when I was accepted for my PhD in Buffalo was January, but I already left my previous job and I ended up working for one of the main incineration facility of the city of Vienna. Actually, they were incinerating specifically hazardous waste. And I was there because they were importing waste from neighbor countries, such as Italy, where I come from. So I was there because I could speak, well, German and Italian, and they needed somebody for the Italians because the Italians, they don't like to speak any other language rather than Italian. So they just want, and especially for business, they don't want to deal with people who don't speak Italian. So that's why I was there.
For all you listeners out there, we have already made the Italian mafia waste management jokes.
So the value of goods is incredibly relative based on whether we can use or reuse them, which means Germany was making the UK paper folks an offer they couldn't refuse.
We're just joking. We love you. Please don't come find us.
So, Elena, how could an ontology solve this problem of illegal waste?
When I was in Austria, I had this fun thing that we had two different categorization systems. One was the European waste catalog. So we were receiving waste from third countries under the European waste catalog, according to international laws of waste management. Although the Austrians have the Austrian waste catalog. So there was one person in charge in the office of translating the codes from one catalog to the other. At the time, for me, was just, that's bureaucracy. I don't do it. It's my colleague who does it. Who cares?
Did they do that by hand?
Yeah, they had a book.
Wow. Not even a computer program. They just looked it up down the column. Wow.
Yeah.
Very efficient.
Yeah, because they have two very different categorization logics. One is process-based from the European waste catalog. So where does the waste come from? From the textile industry, from the paper industry. And based on that, you get different codes. The Austrian catalogs, it's more based on the chemical profile of the waste. So it's much more granular, much more complicated. So and then in my head, I was like, oh, geez, what if this person at a certain point retires? Who is going to substitute him? There is no automatization here.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. How much experience did this person have? And were they afraid that We always joke in my workplace, if somebody gets hit by a bus, how are we going to continue this work?
Yeah, I would just say that this person spent his whole life at that company. It's public company. So kind of a fixed job, another generation way of thinking. So after 40 years, although they were not training somebody to substitute him in the next 5 or 10 years. So yeah, and when I enrolled at UB, I was just like, okay, now I see what ontology can do, and actually I have something in mind that could be a real world example that it's a kind of a hard problem to fix. Needs a lot of work because, waste categorization system, although they don't have super sophisticated definition, as they have very different logic on the way they are built, takes a bit of work to merge from one to the other. So yeah, that's why I thought waste could be an interesting domain for applied ontology.
Thanks again for being on the podcast, Elena. I have a question myself here. Sometimes this is a bit of a nightmare to ask some ontologists, but and maybe you don't even want to show the skeletons in the closet here, but what are some like pitfalls or like challenges that you found while you were trying to map out this waste ontology?
In my understanding and from my knowledge, there is not so many ontological work done in waste management. So one of the things that certain domain ontology do is first look for other ontologies that they exist in that domain, build on them, add new definitions, or maybe open some issues and try to solve them on open sources platform like GitHub. For waste, it's still a bit, it's not so developed. There are not so many people around working on waste. So this is a bit the challenge. First, my problem was, is this an interest? So, because for me it was interesting, but I was like, is this interesting for applied ontology community, thinking about how to improve waste management through the methodology that applied ontology give us, plus not so much literature in the specific domain. And then also the domain itself, if we think about biomedical ontologies, we have started biomedical ontologies in the 60s. And waste is much less developed. We really have not so much. So we don't have a platform. We don't. It's really, you feel like a freelance. I feel like that the most of the time, and just feeling sometimes me talking to myself about how I can solve this problem between different waste standards. So yeah, a bit loneliness of the domain in this domain.
Hey, Elena, I'm just curious. You said that, not as much work has been done with the waste management portion within ontologies, but has there been a lot of work done in the areas that waste management manages, like food? I know that there are, food ontologies, and I imagine like metals a lot in that regard, and wood. So like the material aspect of waste management. Have you found that there are ontologies in that space, and it's just sort of the process of waste management that hasn't really been fully investigated, or what is lacking in that area?
I would say that we can find, as you say, the different material ontology also for textiles, because let's say that textile is the domain I'm working the most at the moment. So I found some ontologies for textile industry, but my approach is to start from what we have in the world. So also my approach with ontology is not start building the textile waste ontology. So that's why I took the approach of building a crosswalk between different categorization system. So it's a bit hard for me to, and maybe it's one of my limits, to think how to integrate those material ontology and the terminology that we have in those in something that tries to take what we have right now and not trying to build something from the very scratch. In the domain of food, there are food ontologies, and we can think about food on. We can think there is also EnVO, which is an environmental ontology and has a definition of waste as a role, BFO role, so context dependent again. So there is something, and now since I've start interacting more with broader communities. We have a small working group building a mid-level waste ontology. So I'm very happy that I have somebody interacting that I can interact with about this domain. So we are also trying to find all the terminology that we can from other different ontologies, maybe, as you said, from slightly different domain, and create somehow a common ground where we can build on that different, because in my understanding, my view is that we will have a mid-level waste ontology, compact, and on that we can build more specific waste domain ontologies such as textiles, hazardous, and so on.
What is the ultimate outcome that you would be trying to achieve with this waste management? You mentioned the illegal, like you really would love to be able to wave a magic wand and solve the illegal waste trafficking. And I'm just curious, could you help me frame out in my mind, like when I hear you talk, it sounds like if we were able to have applied ontology within this waste management space, we would be able to be more effective with our recycling, and is the ultimate goal to reduce the amount of waste and be more efficient in our recycling, or is the goal to be more efficient in how quickly we can process waste management? All of the above. Like what outcomes are you trying to achieve in this space?
So one side, I would say that we could definitely think about improving recycling, and that would be also one of my goals. For example, now that I'm trying to think about textile waste nomenclature, one of the problems pointed out by different reports from, for example, European Union is that we don't know what the product is going to end up doing. So, for example, we don't know is this particular shipment of textile waste going to be incinerated, landfilled, recycled, or reused. We just don't know. So incorporating this terminology, I think it's relevant, because based on that, we can have a better view of which are our amount of textile waste, how we can prevent it, how we can improve our recycling.
With definitions, because your domain seems to be really niche, what sort of experts are you asking, if there's any that you can ask, to help you kind of guide yourself in making these sorts of classes? And if you don't, explain what your decisions might be then when you're making such classes, like textile waste.
That's very important. I still don't have, for example, for textile, a domain expert. I was trying to find some way to have some collaboration with Goodwill. Not easy, not very easy, because they just see random names. And if you don't know somebody inside, because for me it would be very interesting to see how, let's say, a big player such as Goodwill that handles tons and tons of textile, what do they use internally? It's a big supply chain among different states. So that would be, I would have for them a lot of questions. I would really like to have some insights. So I'm working with the waste management professor here at UB. His name is John Atkinson. So we have been working together also for me to have some insight from somebody who is an engineer from his academic background, and to see how my work can be relevant. It's for researcher, but also for somebody who has a broader knowledge of the domain than I do.
So if anyone is listening and knows somebody at Goodwill Corporate, write in, unless it's the year 2030, and then look for Elena's PhD thesis. Elena, once you finish this project, what or who is your customer? Who needs this ontology, and how would you market it to them?
So my case study of textile waste is addressing two classification systems, one the European Waste Catalog and the other is the Harmonized System. I'm doing that because I see a policy implication. Textile waste is just a case study to take the domain from a small point of view, and then we can apply the methodology to the whole classification system. This would be my goal. because in Europe, they are trying to create digital platform for tracking waste shipments. And from the documentation available to the public, I see that they still have these two family of codes. So one shipment will be, so the same product will have two different codes, but we're talking about the same material with the same characteristics. So I think the integration would be important of these two. That's why I'm starting from these two categorization system for policy implication.
Once you solve the great mystery of the waste ontology, what is your next ontology you would want to focus on?
That's a great question. I am thinking so much about waste that I don't see the end of the tunnel.
Counterpoint, does she need a new ontology, or is ontology just the magic wand that comes to you when you're thinking, how do I deal with all this data? None of it makes sense. Poof, ontology, basic formal ontology, it fixes it, and you go on with your life.
Yeah, I really like domain ontologies. So I've been I also been working on biomedical ontologies for oral health, in particular dental fear and anxiety. So honestly, I like different challenges that the different domains have for the ontologist who is just there trying to make everything conformant through a framework which is embracing the realities such as BFO does. So right now, it's true, I'm very focused on waste, but I don't exclude to go to many different other domains. I was talking to a friend of mine who is doing his PhD in cancer research here at UB, and he was telling me how he struggles to have to set up the experiment that he sees from other papers and just have it reproduce in the same way with the same results, because the information provided are sometimes lacking details, the terminology is different. So it's also an idea that I have on the back of my head right now to start a project on this. So how we can have better reproducibility of scientific research, and what ontology can do, how we can help them. Because for me, it's when you have a methodology that can help solving problems, it's literally just making me smile to think, okay, let's apply this tool, let's make them useful for somebody.
What sort of advice would you give, up and coming ontologists, just like yourself before you started your PhD now? Before you got into ontology, you might have known a little bit here and there. And I'm sure there's a lot of folk out there that have heard of BFO, but they don't really know what it is. They don't know the exacts for it. What sort of advice would you give to somebody, coming out of their master's or coming out of their bachelor's, and they're like, I'm thinking about learning more about applied ontology?
First part of my advice, and it comes from me, because the second part won't come from me, will come from the godfather, Barry Smith. So starting from my advice will be curious. At the beginning, I would say find out about the formal aspect of applied ontology. So, for example, I really like the philosophical background of it. So have a bit of this philosophical curiosity about finding out where it comes from, why we structure reality through categories. So a bit of Aristotle. I think it's all very nice and enjoyable, this side, also having as a background knowledge. So this is sparkling curiosity at the beginning before starting wetting your feet into the field and in the more technical aspect, such as, okay, now I have to write a Sparkle query or all these kind of things. I think this will come a bit later, or at least that's what I like to do. And after that, and this is the Barry advice, will be find something that you truly love and enjoy, and you can just think about that, and you don't mind spending time, hours and hours on that, because when you have to model a domain, you will end up fighting with that domain, spending hours thinking on, why am I doing this? What's the point? So if you find it interesting and very enjoyable, I think it's a bit easier.
Well, Elena, we actually have, for each of our podcast guests, their very own question from the Godfather. For you, Elena, he has chosen where do you believe BFO should evolve from here?
I once heard that something that is perfect shouldn't be changed. So I will not say that BFO is perfect. That I wouldn't say that. Although it's very hard to think about changing the structure of BFO. That's why I struggle with the formal aspects of ontologies, because you cannot just touch one thing and don't affect the entire structure. My 2 cents won't be on how to rethink the structure or anything else inside BFO, because I don't have the competency to say that.
The stability of BFO is one of its strengths. And almost paradoxically, its flexibility to handle any domain is another of its strengths.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I think how BFO, but also how other upper level ontologies might think on how to evolve is to try to find a common ground, because having different upper level ontologies, it's sometimes things harder in interoperability domains, because we cannot really merge databases or anything else into each other if we have different structure who holds the interoperability architecture. I think that would be there could be a challenge for BFO, and thinking about how to find common ground with other upper levels.
All right. Well, thanks again, Elena, for the time and for all the effort that you're putting into the community. I know that the work that you're going to be producing in the next 4 years here, once you're done with your PhD, is going to be, I'm sure, immeasurable in your domain. I appreciate everyone else's time here. I'm signing off.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. I will make my joke. I hope it wasn't a waste of time.
It certainly was not. You are a fantastic guest, and we learned so much. So thank you for spending some time with us.
You totally ruined my train of thought, though.
Is it about Latin?
No, it's never about Latin, John.
I know it's never about Latin.